Hey folks, it's Fernando doing another video for Modern Survivalists, and this video is about being prepared for the kind of rioting that you've probably seen taking place in Ferguson. This is something that is pretty upsetting, all the violence, rioting and civil unrest on the streets. You may be wondering, what would you do if something like that happens? I've seen some advice regarding how to deal with that if you ever get caught in such a riot or violent incident. And the advice I've seen is actually pretty bad. It's obviously by people that have never been caught in anything like that. I have a little bit of experience regarding that sort of thing. For almost a decade, it was pretty much daily basis of dealing with roadblocks, rioting, looting, and such. So it's going to be this video is going to be 5 tips on how to deal with rioting, looting, and civil unrest when it happens in your city, when it becomes common occurrence in your country. Okay. Tip number 1, and the most important thing to keep in mind, is information. Okay. You have TV, radio, internet. Use all 3 so as to stay updated on current events. Information is by far the most important thing to keep in mind. If you know what's happening, you can avoid it. If you know what's happening out there in the streets, you can avoid those specific places. You can avoid the dangerous areas. It's very much like security and violent incidents. If you can avoid them entirely, that's always better. Doesn't make for great war stories, but it's so much better to avoid the violent confrontation in the first place whenever possible. For me, it became a daily ritual almost in Buenos Aires. Before hitting the streets, turning on the TV, it would be, I would always need like 15-20 minutes before leaving of catching the news on TV and seeing what's going on. And even when I got into my car, listening to the radio so as to see what was happening. Maybe if there was a roadblock taking place somewhere, if there was a protest expected somewhere, or if there was rioting somewhere, those you would avoid whenever possible, taking alternative routes. This takes us to tip number 2, which is awareness. If you can avoid the confrontation, if you can avoid the problem, that's always better. Sometimes it happens too fast. Sometimes it's ongoing events that's happening right in front of you, so it's not already in the news. When that happens, the only chance you have to avoid that is awareness. Very much like you have awareness when on foot on the street, same thing happens in your vehicle. All right, you probably drive around thinking of already mentally programmed so as to think a few things that you do pretty much automatically. You just drive, maybe thinking of somewhere else, but always on the back of your head you have this idea of thinking of traffic laws, of following the looking at the red light, green light whenever you're making a turn, making a mental note of the vehicles around you, the movement of each one, of pedestrians as well, stopping in the street lights and such. All those things happen pretty much automatically in your head when you drive around. For me in Buenos Aires, besides that, it was always also noticing suspicious movements, suspicious activity around as well. If you saw maybe people rushing towards you or in any given direction, all of a sudden running, running would be something that immediately caught your attention, especially if it was 2, 3 or more people. That was something that quickly caught your attention, and you were always in the back of your head thinking and expecting that a little bit. It's happening right now in Buenos Aires, becoming more common that sometimes during traffic jams, a group of criminals attack people in their vehicles. They mug them in their vehicles because of the traffic jam. They're all caught, they're all trapped in their cars and they cannot go anywhere. One car against the other, and it's just very easy for groups of 10, 20 people just like piranhas, just spreading and stealing and robbing everyone. To me, it happened once that I was, just driving, and I saw a group of men just cutting the road in front of me. Actually, it happened more than once, and in the times that it did happen to me, I reacted fast enough so as to avoid it. Once I made a U-turn and went against the traffic, flashing the lights of my car, and then got on a lateral road. Many times it was just a matter of accelerating a little bit more, getting into making a turn a left or to a right, and avoiding getting caught there. If you just freeze when you see the crowd, when you see the mob heading your way, if you freeze there, you may end up getting caught by the ongoing traffic around you. They just keep going, and you just get caught between the traffic, the mob, the crowd, and then you're pretty much done. You're trapped in there, and you're just have no other choice. But if you react fast enough, if you are aware in your vehicle, as you should be on foot as well, you may end up having other options. Maybe going up a boulevard, maybe going up the sidewalk so as to find ways, maybe going off-road a little bit, which brings us to the point of having a vehicle that's a little bit taller. An SUV or four-wheel drive vehicle gives you a little bit more options if you have to make any quick maneuvers so as to avoid the mob heading your way. It's pretty surreal having experienced that firsthand. You see all the crowd just like ants, like swarming over the road in front of you. It's pretty impressive, but you don't have to freeze. You have to react fast enough, being careful so as to not get involved in a car accident, crash against a vehicle, or run over someone with your car. But react fast with keeping calm, but reacting. Don't freeze. Just get out of there. Okay. So that's tip number 2, awareness even inside your vehicle, looking for suspicious activity as well. Tip number 3 is, if this happens, if you're still caught, if you failed also at awareness, and you just find yourself, because of whatever reason, you find yourself surrounded by the mob, stay calm. Okay, tip number 3 is stay calm and keep moving. All right, it happened to me only once that I got surrounded and caught by surrounded by the angry mob chanting, breaking things and such. It is pretty scary. In my case, they were just pushing the vehicle, and there was so much people that the car moved, like a toy. You just push it around, and they were hitting on it, on my car and such. You have to keep moving. You have to remain calm, but keep moving. What speed? About the same speed, the same speed of the walking crowd. Like walking speed. And you have to keep moving while trying to maneuver away from the crowd. Okay, keep calm, keep moving, maneuver away from the crowd, and try to get out of there. All right, so that's tip number 3. This may be different depending on what's happening. The crowd may end up being more violent, more agitated. They start hitting on your windows. They may end up trying to break them and pull you out of your vehicle, which these are possible variations if you're caught by a mob that is specifically targeting, or it's maybe a racial motivated riot. Maybe it's like, if you're caught by, if you're like a white guy and something like the Rodney King thing happened, and you're surrounded by the mob, there's a good chance that you're gonna be pulled out of your vehicle and beaten up. So you may want to step up a little bit more, but not too fast. Maybe a little bit faster than walking pace, so as to avoid anyone having good grasp on your vehicle and smashing the windows or pulling you out of there. It requires nerves of steel, so as to stay calm in that kind of situation, but that's what you should be doing. Tip number 4 is about having a weapon with you, about concealed carrying your firearm. Okay, tip number 4: be armed, as you should be when and where legal to do so. Okay, having your concealed carry weapon with you. In a riot, in a case of civil unrest, it's even more important to have adequate training. Not just have the firearm with you, have good training so as to know when to use your firearm and how to use it. There's been people that have saved their lives because they were armed. There's people that have used their firearm when caught in a riot and ended up in jail for using that gun and shooting people. They ended up in jail. There's people that got away with it, and they went to trial and they avoided going to jail. But there's both possible outcomes. What specifically ends up happening, it's anyone's guesses depending on that specific case. But the better training that you have, the more calm you remain, the better the chances of a somewhat positive outcome. But it's definitely a last resort. Bringing out your weapon in a crowd and start shooting is pretty much a last resort. If it's either that or getting beaten to death. In general, you're much better off by following the first 3 tips that I was talking about. Okay, but there's still a possibility. If there's a rioting, if there's civil unrest, you're maybe on foot, you lost your vehicle, or you left your vehicle behind, or you weren't able to recover your vehicle, and you're on foot, and maybe on a lateral street there's a small group of individuals with hostile attitudes coming after you. You use your weapon. At least having your weapon gives you options. Okay, that doesn't mean that you should draw your gun and start brandishing your gun. That's an awful idea, but it gives you a last resort weapon for self-defense. As of course it should be used in that way only, but remaining calm, and in some specific cases it may end up saving your skin being armed. All right, that's tip number 4. Number 5 is regarding what to do in terms of rioting and civil unrest when in your house, when in your home. And the last tip that I'm going to be giving you, tip number 5: when there's rioting, when there's civil unrest on the street, the best course of action when you're in your house is bugging in, staying put. That's the standard procedure for civil unrest. Some of the advice I've seen, awful advice. People talking about bugging out when there's a civil unrest. No, that's a pretty bad idea. All right, it's actually an awful idea to do such a thing. You're much better served by staying put. The chances of people coming after privately owned residences, in general, what I've observed and what I've seen not only happen in Argentina but in other parts of the world, when there's rioting and looting, looters specifically go for stores, go for businesses. Okay, they're looking for. That doesn't mean it may not happen. It may happen as well, which brings us to another entirely different topic, which is self-defense from within your residence and such. But in general, the best course of action is staying put. You're much more putting yourself in much greater danger by hitting the streets in that moment of civil unrest, of rioting, than staying put. Odds are most definitely in your favor if you stay put. Okay, going back to tip number 4 about being armed. That's a worse place to be in than already being home. Regarding being armed in such an event, it goes back to what I've always told you guys about the kind of gun that you have should always be the most capable firearm, Glock 17. I've said it many times, and this is a good example of why the right gun with the right training may make the difference. You definitely don't want to have low ammunition capacity in your firearm if you ever have to use it in such a case with multiple attackers. You definitely want to have a firearm that is adequate for that and the training to go along with it. okay? And when you're in your house, staying put is always the best way to go about it. Don't let your nerves get the best out of you. Stay put and keep up with the news. If you're inside a defendable position, your house, you have your firearms for defense, odds of someone trying to break in, when you make it clear that you're armed and willing to shoot anyone trying to break in, pretty much, you know, the only case, that doesn't mean, guys, that you should not have plans to bug out. As I mentioned in my previous, in my recently published book, Bugging Out and Relocating, there's always a chance, there's always a possibility of you having to bug out. We've been seeing it recently with riots in terms of arson and fire. If that fire spreads and you have to bug out of your house, that may end up being the case. But in general, you're much better served by staying put. Okay, folks, remember there's my 2 books, Bugging Out and Relocating, which I was just mentioning, and my first book, The Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse. The links to those 2 are there below in the descriptions, links to Amazon. Folks, just a little bit of realistic information regarding what to do when you are experiencing this kind of violence in the streets, rioting, looting, and widespread civil unrest. It's scary, it's pretty impressive, and unfortunately I think it's going to be becoming more and more common in the United States, at least more common than it used to be, because of the developing situation and the ongoing crisis. I think you are going to be seeing a little bit more of that, unfortunately. So folks, remember to subscribe, share the video, thumbs up if you did like it. Take care, have a great day, see you on our next video.